Okay, thank you very much for coming. You're probably wondering, who on earth is this person standing in front of me? So I'm Julian Williams, and I'm a professor in the business school, but I'm also co-director in the Institute of Hazard, Risk and Resilience, a relatively new appointment. So this is my first role interacting with the Risk Masters, so I'm really pleased to be here and be able to do that. And I'd just like to thank Louise and Andrew for inviting me to do this. And I won't be here very long because my job is going to be to introduce Luca, who I've had the privilege of working with now for nearly 10 years, which is amazing enough. And Luca was actually also very briefly a student in Durham for 6 months visiting when he was doing his PhD in 2014. And since then has gone on to be a relatively big superstar in the area of cybersecurity and in particular understanding how we get hacked. In fact, that's one of his specialties, is actually understanding what happens when people are trying to actually infiltrate networks and systems and actually extract information from computers. Luca was originally an undergraduate student at Milan, and before doing a PhD at the University of Trento in Italy, is now at the Technical University of Eindhoven as an assistant professor in computing science, and also is part of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is the US standard setter for technology, and he's part of the cybersecurity working group there, which sets cybersecurity standards for the entire world, basically. So if you've got antivirus installed on your computer, if you've ever used a university computer, then at some point you will have actually interacted with some of the protocols that Luca has been developing with Microsoft and various other companies. So he knows what he's talking about. So I will push the floor over to Luca and I will let you take over. And I think we've got until about 10 past 2-ish. So.
Okay, I'll do my best to stay on schedule. So good morning, everybody. No, but good afternoon. Thank you, Julian, for the introduction. As always, very flattering. So today we're gonna speak about a slightly, probably different kind of slightly different type of threat than you maybe be used to. Is that we're not gonna very much look into natural causes of things happening because some system just behaves in a way. We're going to look at how humans interact with cyber systems to actually deliver attacks. And we're going to do this first by having a very brief historical, if you want, but not just pedagogical, but also foundational, if you want, review of what the hacker means and what the hacking figure really evolved into. We're going to see a little bit the foundations. I'm trying to keep all the technical bits and pieces stripped out of the talk, okay? So we're not gonna look at code and things, but I still want to give you a good impression of how the infrastructure allows for cyber threats to exist in the first place, okay? So my intention there is to try to convince you that this thing is not going away. And then we're gonna look at how some of the more specialized hacking groups, especially Russian ones, cover and exploit how the internet really works to make money out of it, essentially. So the hope is that this will give you a good grasp of how attacks are generated in the first place. So let's first look at what the word hacker means, right? I see very young faces around, so you may be very acquainted with the notion of an hacker as somebody who has a black hoodie on, works nights, and has very bad taste in beer and just steals banking accounts and credit cards and whatnot. But that's not what the hacker has always been. And that's, again, not just a pedagogical differentiation. It's not just academic, lingo. But it also sets up an evolution of the figure of the attacker that then is useful to understand how this thing works. So the first hackers popped around at the late 80s, beginning of the 90s, let's say. But perhaps a more describing term for that would be security enthusiasts, okay? People who just like to test the security of things and have a very specific goal, that is to make security better, okay? They were hacking systems, as a matter of fact, but with the goal of revealing new vulnerabilities that then can be fixed. You see that this is a process that is highly innovative, okay? So these people were actually looking for new stuff. new ways of compromising software, making protocols behave in different ways that were not designed to in the first place, and then making them better. There are a number of things, social engineering, the technique to get your passwords and social networking accounts out of your own mind and deliver them to the actors. The social engineering was really invented by these guys some time ago. It was one of the applications. Some others were more technical, the metering attack and all these things were there. Now, these people are still operating. Actually, we in the security community are trying to actually incentivize this sort of research, because at the end of the day, as I said, it makes security better. And so this figure is still ongoing. It's very much also a professional profile almost nowadays. But then around the new millennium, the year 2000, from 2010 more or less, a new figure emerged. That is what I encompass under the name street kiddies, which are people who have no clue whatsoever of how the technology works. Okay? They just don't know what the attack do, but they have a script, a program that automates the attack. They press a button and they hack a system. Okay? These are script kiddies. You see, there is no innovation whatsoever in this thing. Okay, they're just people that dumbously just take in input a program, they press a button, oh, I'm an hacker, I'm super awesome. Okay? But that's not quite how the thing is. And the goal of these people, importantly, is not to, we're going to get more and more informal, I suppose. The goal of these people is not to innovate attacks at all. It's not even to make security better. It's not even to make money. It's just to mess up with systems. Okay, it's to create havoc. It's just very annoying, okay? And that's what they do. You have heard of the I love you virus? No? It was a thing that popped up at the very end of the 1990s. It was just like a Visual Basic script. You got it into your email. You don't do anything, but the email client was running the code that was embedded into this I love you virus. And all it was doing was changing the names of the files on your system. It's absolutely meaningless. This is very annoying. I mean, all my MP3 files now are Word files. What the hell? I mean, I open it, there's nothing in there. Okay, these sort of things, very meaningless, but very easy to automate. So they scaled very well. And this sets up the scenario for what the modern hacker that you read about every day looks like. Because this guy is a merge of the two. Okay, it takes the part of the innovation of the cyber threats, generates new malware, generates new vulnerabilities, new exploits, new attacks. And it is able to automate them to make what we will see is actually an emerging economy where who is capable of performing the innovation innovates, and who doesn't know how to innovate but sees the utility or is interested in actually deploying then the attacks, buys them and automates them, without being able to actually understand what's the technical process behind it. And if you heard, and certainly you have heard of ransomware and these sort of things, this is exactly where it comes from. Okay? It's a technical innovation that is automated at scale, affecting the world worldwide. So this is what sets a little bit the scene. Now I will ask you to indulge me for a few slides. I didn't manage really to keep all the technicalities out, but I tried to really strip out all the technical bits, but it's very important that we understand and we're on the same page of how the internet really works, okay, and what really enables these people to eventually make money out of this. So this is how the internet was once upon a time. Okay? It is the more easy version of how I can imagine to, represent the internet back then. So it is a user with a browser, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, these sort of things. You know what a browser is, that wants to see the page of the BBC, okay? So there are two steps. That's a very, 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 the more core aspect of everything is you send over a request to the BBC, and the BBC sends back an answer, sends back data. And what essentially sends back is a copy, okay? It's a copy of all the data that is stored on the BBC website in London onto your browser, okay? And what happens is that now the browser, your computer, has data, has information that received from there, and what it does is executes it. And the word execute, don't take it lightly, okay? It's not like it shows an image of a cat and that's the end of the story. What really happens is that this thing is executing instructions that were stored on the bbc.com website. To give an example, this is the BBC homepage yesterday evening. I loaded it up, I made a screenshot, I added it to the slide, I checked the actual code. This thing, when it was loaded onto my system and my system executed it, had 81 JavaScript programs on it. You don't know what JavaScript is. JavaScript is what is called it's a language that is everywhere on the internet. Every single website has it. But it's very powerful. What is called a Turing-complete language. Turing-complete means that you can write in JavaScript anything that goes from an operating system to the code that takes the shuttle to the moon. Okay, anything whatsoever. That thing does not only display cat pictures, it also sends shuttles to the moon. Okay, and that's what your browser is executing. And there were 81 of those things on that web page. There were 80 to 182 functions. Some of them were coming from 30 more external sources. That was not the BBC, it was something else. And they were also pointing to content and code that was stored on almost 200 websites. That was not the BBC. Okay, this is what my browser did yesterday evening. You see what I mean by executing, okay? Now, this is not the full picture, of course, because you know that the internet works based on advertisement. Right, so now what really happens is that BBC.com is not just BBC.com, it's BBC.com plus an orange part. A piece that is advertisement or videos or the Facebook button that you see everywhere, share this thing and whatever. These all things that come from outside. So by some third content provider somewhere else, okay? The orange, it's going to be the orange guy today, okay? It's just going to be referring to it as the orange guy. So this guy stores something somewhere else, and there's a contract essentially with BBC. It puts the orange thing onto the BBC website. So now you figure what happens, right? The BBC goes over, but now it's not only BBC.com that gets executed, it also has this orange part. And the orange part says, oh, this is not quite coming from BBC. I need to call the orange guy and see what the orange guy tells me. So it goes over, calls the orange guy, which sends back the actual content in the orange part of BBC.com and executes that one as well. You see where I'm going to. Then, this is not really how Google makes money, however, right? It still serves advertisement, but it does not really store the picture of the motorbike you want to buy. It just has a contract with somebody else who wants to sell that motorbike, okay? So that's called ad syndicator, okay? And it's a very important process of how the business model of the internet is sustainable in the first place, right? So there is that orange guy over there that now does not have the content, it's just a syndicator. He has a contract with somebody else that actually wants to sell the motorbike, okay? He's the red guy down there. But this you don't see it, okay? On BBC.com, it's still orange. It's not red, it's still orange, okay? You load the BBC.com, it goes over there, you see that it's orange, you request the content to A, but A doesn't send you the content, it tells you you need to go to B, and you need to talk to B. And then at this point, you see what it says. It says, okay, I'm going to execute BBC.com and this instruction to redirect my connection to B. So it goes over to B. It sends request content to B. B sends it over. Now the orange is not orange. Now the orange is red. And of course, what happens is that that part is being executed. Okay? So you see that what I did is I went on BBC.com, but then my browser did a whole lot of things that I was not really, seeing before, right? He loaded the BBC, I saw the last news about Trump's strange decision, but in the meanwhile my browser contacted other several partners and loaded content from all over the place. Now of course the question is, what happens if that guy is not so good? What happens if that red guy is actually a bit malicious? What happens if that guy doesn't send pictures of cats or pictures of motorbikes, but sends malware or the JavaScript code that can do whatever it wants onto your browser? Now that's the question. And this is not really just hypothetical, right? This is a problem of how trust is transferred over this chain. Because it may not be very clear from this, but there is no reason why this thing is only two hops. Okay, this thing can jump from content A to content B to C to D to E to F as many times as you want. That does not matter. This chain can be as long as you want. And this is an example of an actual problem that was there not very long ago. There was a publisher of a website. So the BBC.com example would be the freeonlinegames.com over there, which had a contract with Google. And Google does that thing that is advert syndicator, okay? So that guy has a trust relationship with DoubleClick.net, which is another ad syndicator, which has a number of it has an advertisement network, which is a little bit loose on the way that it grants contract to, content people. So some of that stuff were cut pictures, and some of that stuff was actually malware. So what happened is that you were loading freeonlinegames.com, you were redirected to Google, was redirecting you to DoubleClick, was redirecting you to AdsLoader, which was redirecting you to enginedelivery.com, and eventually you got this thing that was a fake antivirus on your system that was asking you money to remove malware that wasn't there in the first place. Okay, so just one piece of malware. And you see, this thing can go on forever and ever, right? And you may also say, but look, come on, if you go on freeonlinegames.com, but maybe that's just a very, fishy website. The name already seems a little bit weird, right? So maybe this works only for the very small parts of the internet, which are actually very large, where these sort of things seem to be popular. But then, no, there are a number of cases. There are actually so many cases the security community had to give it a name to this phenomenon. And this is an example from the Hasbro website, the big guys that produce games, huge website. The businessweek.com website, the one that CFOs like so much and go there every weekend to get the last news, it was serving what we in the security community call drive-by downloads. So you just visit a website, and then through the process I just showed you, eventually your browser is executing some malware, is downloading some malware onto the system and executes it. And this drive-by download thing is so at the very core of how infection propagation works in the internet that, as we're going to see in the rest of the talk today, there are a number of tools, hacking tools, that those economic attacker I showed you in the first slide use to both innovate the type of attacks that you get and also to automate it, to scale it up to a market where people can buy it. So last two slides with the schema, I promise. So this is how this thing then works with exploit kits in place. It's a different layout, but it's exactly what it was before, right? There is the bbc.com in the middle, there is the user, and there is somebody who kind of attacks bbc.com and puts that small thing that before I called an ad, now it's an iframe. It's just a piece of code in a web page that points toward the exploit kit. Now we understand how this thing is working, right? You load bbc.com. If you load bbc.com, you load the iframe, which means that your browser calls the exploit kit, which means that the exploit kit delivers its attack to your own computer. And this is the dumbed down version of how the exploit kit works, right? But then we can plug this into the scenario with the actual ad syndicator, okay? The people that really control how internet connections are redirected throughout the internet. So now there is the advertisement, or there is an iframe, and there is somebody which is essentially the evil partner of Google, essentially, which are called traffic brokers or actual other hackers, or just advertising syndicator really, that buy those places on bbc.com. They buy the advertisement. But then on the other hand, they have a contract with the hacker who actually possesses the exploit kit. Okay, so the hacker says to the traffic broker, listen, I need 1,000 connections that come from Italy, from a system that is running Windows XP and is using the Internet Explorer browser. This guy complies, right? He knows who is loading bbc.com. It just measures the system that is loading bbc.com and the advertisement, and whenever there is this connection that is of interest for its client, it just redirects it to this client through the syndication mechanism that I showed you before, goes over to the exploit kit, you know how it ends, right? So this is how exploit kits work, and we're going to see exploit kits are really the tool that attackers are using to get to the systems. And you see that this is no workaround, okay? These hackers really are not trying to, get themselves into the mechanisms of how the internet and software works in order to get money out. No, they're actually using the very business model of the internet. You don't get this thing out of the internet, okay? Advertisement and redirection is exactly how the internet works. And they're just using that to make money. So it's not a hack. It's not really it's not a workaround. It's something that is there and is going to stay. All the advancement process is in the red arrow over there, is on how the attack looks like. in what the attack actually delivers. Which is the reason why there is now this emergence of cyber attacks. There is this emergence of a market where who is capable of innovating the attack, the red arrow in the previous slide, is then trading these attacks in forms of exploit kits or in form of malware or in form of traffic. It doesn't really matter, to people who want to monetize on that. So essentially there has been this development of several different cyber criminal markets. They're mostly in Russian and Chinese speaking communities. Several of those are also in English. Most prominent ones in the sense of rate of innovation. From what we see on the technical side, they're mostly the Russian communities. That, I mean, they deserve their reputation, I suppose. And the idea of these markets is that they allow for a huge amount of composition, okay? You can buy any type of exploit kit you want, you can buy any, arm it with any type of malware you want, get traffic from the people that you want, and you can combine this with a number of services that essentially make the attack very personalizable, right? So you can really get exactly the type of attack that you want. And the idea that every single contributor in the market is contributing just one thing, one aspect of how the cyber attack works. And then it's up to the customer to combine all the different aspects to generate the attack they really want, is what makes this market very powerful, right? The problem is that most of these markets, or well, not really all of these markets, are very good at innovating and producing new technology. So here I have an example. You heard of the deep web, the dark web part of the internet where all these markets are supposed to be. This is a very important market. It's called the dream market. It's one of the biggest ones. It's actually where, have you heard of Alphabet and Dansa? No? It's the markets that the FBI and the Dutch police took down. There were huge markets in the underground. They were selling mostly very nasty stuff, from drugs to child pornography and nasty things. They took it down, and everybody who was on the Ants and Alphabet market flocked over to this one, to this dream market, which turns out to be now very big, although it has a fishy reputation nowadays, but what to do. If you go there in the hacking section, it also looks promising, right? Because it has 1,500 contributions, looks like it's an important market with lots of good. But then you look at the stuff that it has, and these are bitcoins, so 0.0002 bitcoins is approximately $3 or something like that. And you buy things that are like hack someone using their IP address, which maybe to you doesn't say much, but to a community expert that looks at it, it's like super lame. It's like stuff that you were doing like when you were 12 years old, and it's like a guide, okay? There's no innovation there, it's just a manual. It's just a manual, and that's it. On how to install Linux, essentially, okay, the operating system. That cannot be where the actual innovation is. You go to another fairly big market, you go in the digital goods part, and they sell Vicodin. That doesn't make any sense. There's nothing there at all. Obviously, this is not the real thing. And some of the markets kind of look like this. Then you end up in the actually good market. This one is a screenshot from the top 10 products traded in a Russian market. You see the Russian advertisement on the left, whereas the exploit of Rig 3.0 is the exploit kit. You see that they have a number of exploit kits in the right top 10 products that they have. Exploit kit Rig, the exploit kit Neutrino, and Nuclear are three very big exploit kits that are detected as being used in the internet, in the wild. They've been delivering millions of attacks for the latest 6 to 8 months, essentially. You see that they have those. They have tools to encrypt malware, so that malware, every time it lands onto your system, it looks different to the antivirus. So the antivirus maybe knows about that malware, but it doesn't recognize it. They have a service to automate this, so that every time your exploit kit sends malware, it generates essentially something that looks different, and Norton antivirus fails to detect it. Of course, that's added value for their exploitation process. They have a set of sales for Microsoft Office exploits, some stuff for Windows, other things to actually do the encryption on the fly, so that instead of being customer-based, it's connection-based. Instead of generating one new malware sample per customer, they do it for every new connection that you saw the exploit kit generates towards the user's web page. They have web injectors, malware bots, all this sort of stuff. So looks much different, let's say, than the previous two, right? Where they were selling either manuals to hack somebody through their IP address or decoding, which didn't really have anything to do with that anyway. So how do you get to measure these things? How do you actually get to see those hackers interacting into these markets where they trade and innovate and generate new attacks? Well, it's a long story, and it's a story I love to say, but today I just have one slide. I promise to make it short, but then if you have questions or other, we can answer that possibly offline maybe. Where back in 2011 I started looking at how these markets look like in the dark part of the web a little bit, and also in the open internet. And I've looked at a couple of dozens, about 20 of those markets, and most of them were just like the previous two that I showed you. Okay, very weak innovation, no real evidence that they were proper markets. As a matter of fact, all of them, with a set of criteria that was strict enough to identify the markets that really innovate technology, went down the pipe. I had to trash them, were not interesting at all. Only one remained to be very, to show strong evidence that it was interesting or prominent enough to actually merit attention. And this is what I call the RU market. RU market is a Russian forum-based market. RU market is not the real name, of course. It's a market that I have been looking at since 2011, more or less. And then I always like to call this a market infiltration process. But to be honest with you, in 2011, it was not really market infiltration. Of course, I wasn't saying that I was Luca Allodi from the University of Trento with my original affiliation as an email address in the contact of the forum. I was just saying, I was some Evgeny guy from St. Petersburg with a mail.ru web address. And that's what pretty much it. I was just into the market as a subscription thing. But then this changed, and changed very rapidly, when in 2013, one very prominent member of the community got arrested by the Russian authorities. He messed up with the wrong people, essentially. And the guy went on to prison. This guy was operating mainly into this market. And he actually was one of the authors of a very important exploit kit. It was called the Black Hole exploit kit. Very evocative name. And what happened in 2013 is that subsequent to this arrest, the market kind of panicked. But didn't panic by closing down or closing the transactions or closing the activity. What they did is they kicked out everybody who was not actively participating in the community. And I, of course, was one of those, right? Because I was a PhD student, I was looking at stuff, I was not really buying malware because the European funding was not allowing me to, right? Sorry. Yeah, I tried to convince the policymakers. So I was kicked out, and then in order to get back in, there were only two options, essentially, that the market administrators were giving you. The first one is that you knew somebody into the market already, some well-reputed, trustworthy member of the community that can vouch for you, okay? Yeah, that guy is pretty good, you should let him in. The second way is that you can show somehow that you are, let's say, a reputable member of the Russian hacking community, okay? And in order to get back in, well, I didn't know anybody into the community, right? So I had to go like with the second option. That is to actually become a part of the Russian hacking community myself, which essentially, luckily, did not involve anything. Is it recording?
Too illegal.
So, okay, now that way you see, I wanted to see anything illegal, or if it is not recording anything too illegal, but then you spoiled it, so it's nothing too illegal, I suppose, to get into the market, which involved essentially finding the right affiliate hacking communities that were easy to access, to get a reputation there, discussing with people how to build things, etc., giving mostly really academic advice in a sense on how to program and what functions you can use to get what behavior and whatnot. And then after more than 7-8 months of work, I was actually here in Durham when that happened. I got back into the market, and I've been in the market since. It's been 3 years now, and I've been observing how these Russian criminals operate, and they trade new technology and whatnot. Well, how does it look like? I have some examples only of things. On the right-hand side, you find it's all the Russian, the original Russian, that then, if you look the video, will ask obviously to take out this content, because the right-hand side kind of identifies the market a bit. So also don't take pictures, please, whenever I take the screenshots of the market up. But anyway, that's the technical description of how the malware look like. And I didn't translate it all because some of that is just going to be very technical lingo. But just to tell you, it gets actually very, very descriptive in what the malware really does. It tells you what vulnerability it exploits. It tells you all the specific functionalities. It tells you, for example, here a report how big it is. It tells you that is in terms of payload size is only 30 kilobytes, very little, which means that it gets to the system very quickly, let's say. It tells you that it evades firewalls and all this sort of stuff. It doesn't require user interaction, which is something that these people like a lot because it keeps the malware stealthy. It does not generate weird behavior that then the user has to click OK to actually execute the malware, right? So it keeps them stealthy, if you want. And then there are a whole lot of technical things. So if you are a technically oriented person and you're interested in a piece of malware, then there is all the information that describes it for you, that makes it palatable for you to actually buy. And this is an important characteristic in terms of market functionality. Then some of more, more folkloristic stuff is that if you want this is a piece of malware, right? Essentially, it executes stuff on the system, then calls the buyer. It calls the computer of the buyer to receive instructions. And what it does is that, have you ever opened the task manager in Windows? The thing with all, no, let me just do something, right? The task manager is the thing with all the list of the processes that the operating system is running. Like when you open Word, the thing for text editing, into the task manager, the Word thing will appear, because that's a process, a program that the operating system is running. And of course, malware is no exception. Remember, this is just programs. They're just programs. Right? So they will spawn a process into the task manager thing. And what the guy tells you that depending on, remember that this is delivered through network connections that the attacker can control. So it tells you if you're targeting specific people in specific countries, you can even personalize the name into the task manager so that the malware just looks like a normal piece of malware, right? If you get some Cyrillic text into an Italian computer, what's that? Terminate task immediately, report it to Norton Antivirus. Whereas this is just a way, say, of obfuscating, if you want, the nature of the malware. And this thing sells for $4,000, which is not little, it's not a lot of money either, right? So it's a fairly valuable piece of technology, if you want. Then you all know about ransomware. This is a piece of ransomware that they sell into the market. It's fairly interesting. It had, again, a very, very long description that I cut out, even in the Russian part, for the most part, on the right over there. But it's very interesting because it is exceptionally small to be ransom. Ransomware typically is chunky because it has images and stuff in it, whereas this one is very, very small. It's only 60 kilobytes, it's very small. It says that it has a multi-threaded encryption, which means essentially that the ransomware acts very, very quickly onto the system because there are multiple parallel processes that encrypt all the data. It uses state-of-the-art encryption algorithms. You can even set up the prices depending on the country that is infected. So people in the Netherlands are richer than people in Turkey, so you can ask a higher ransom in the Netherlands than you would ask if the computer was running in Turkey, and so on. It has a very handy ticketing system. So if the user has problems, the user being the victim, has problems to actually pay the ransom, the malware implements a ticketing system such that the user can contact the malware author to say, I want to pay you, but I don't understand how to do it, and the guy actually gives support. Okay, so they're also very professional with these things. It has a list of countries for which the infection is disabled completely, and these are all the old Soviet countries, which, I don't know if I don't have time for a digression, maybe later on. But this means that essentially the malware will not run onto systems that are, friendly systems of other Russian people, essentially. So they want to keep the malware outside of the Russian borders. The guy doesn't set a price for this. It says you get 50%, I get 50% of whatever ransom you ask. And it says instant payments and things like this. This is some malware botnet for a UK bank. I think NatWest is a UK bank. This is a malware that injects into your mobile phone the web page, a fake web page for the banking, so that instead of sending the payment to the actual recipient, intended recipient, it sends it over to the hacker. Okay, so that's what this thing does. Now, if you systematize this a little bit more and look at the whole different types of products that are traded in this market, there are essentially, broadly speaking, in three categories. Okay, there are the exploit kits, there is malware, and there are what I call standalone exploits that are simply the standalone attack vectors, the actual attacks per se. Just to report, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the prices really with this. So an exploit kit, you get it from, the very bad ones are approximately $150, very small price, all the way up to $2,000 more or less. Malware is somewhere in the middle, from $400 to $4,000, whereas standalone exploits get up to $8,000. Okay, this is the price range. So when you read in the media that a new exploit is selling for $250,000, and kind of fishy. Okay, the real data looks a little bit. Then there are also different exploits, of course, but then these are the numbers essentially that Russian hackers assign to your system. They're willing to pay approximately $2,000 plus a piece of malware. It's $1,000, $2,000, and a couple of exploits that they're willing to pay, let's say, around $10,000, let's say, to infect your computer. Okay, that's what is valuable to them at scale. And there are also some interesting behavior of how these attacks, these prices are evolving in time, but we don't have time for that. You can look at the slide later. So these are the actual attacks. Okay, what I call exploit is really an attack, is one atomic attack. That an exploit kit features multiple attacks, and this is how the single attacks evolve in time. The right here is that a right censored, but you see that there is a first insurgence of number of attacks traded in the market around 2010, 2011, which is when this thing of exploitation as a service built up as a model in the Russian underground. Then there is a drop around 2012, and after 2013 it kind of stabilizes. You see the exploits they have, the attacks for them are targeting mostly Adobe, Microsoft, and Oracle software. Oracle is Java, Adobe is PDF reader and things like these, and Microsoft, well, it's Windows, Internet Explorer mostly, and stuff like that. If you see after 2013, you see that the Oracle line, the blue dotted line over there, drops out. It goes completely to zero, and that's interesting to see, because it tells you something on how these attackers react. Because what happened in 2013, all major web browsers blocked by default the Java plugin because it had a number of security issues. And Java itself increased the security level of its own plugin, meaning that when there is some exception in how the thing the software was being run, the user was notified and he had to click. You remember I had a slide with no user interaction in the piece of malware of the guy? That's exactly what happened. They don't want the user to be notified about something fishy happening on their system, and the functionality that the major browser implemented in 2013 was such that this thing had to happen, full stop. Which means that the market reacted and say, you know what, now I'm not interested anymore in Oracle exploits. I'm only going after with Adobe, Microsoft, and the rest. So that's interesting to see how these things behave. It's also interesting to see the at least correlation, not really causation for sure, I cannot claim that, but it's certainly a parallel, very contingent kind of figure that emerges when you look at the introduction of exploits, of attacks in the markets on the left-hand side, and their adoption in the wild. On the right-hand side, you both have days on the x-axis. On the right-hand side, you see the rate at which new attacks arrive on systems. Okay, so always the same attacks arrive on system, which is the red line. This is the line of no innovation. You always get the same exploit that you buy or that you have somewhere. The black dotted line is the inverse, so you get a new attack every time you are attacked. And what that figure essentially tells you that it takes more than 600 days, about 800 days, for an inversion to happen. So for an old exploit to be substituted at scale with a new exploit. This is what that figure tells you, about 2 years. And then if you map that into the actual introduction of new exploits into the market, you see that 50% of exploits are introduced into the market after more than 6 months. So you see that there is a very, let's say, close relationship between what the hackers innovate into the market and the real effect of attacks in the wild. These are attacks that your system get. These are real measurements of attacks that normal system get, and these are measurements of attacks that the attackers introduce in the market. So there seems to be like, they at least seem to influence that quite a bit. And it's also true if you do it a little bit more rigorously and you actually look, disregard the table and a regression and whatever, what this tells you is essentially that if you compare the left-hand side picture, let's say, with the right-hand side picture, you find that every time the market activity around one exploit doubles, roughly the odds of finding an exploit in the wild double as well. Every time the price doubles, the chances of finding the exploit in the wild half. This is more or less the rule of thumb, which is telling us something on how we can actually take the observations from the market and correlate it to, it's just correlation of course, to what the actual chances of receiving an attack is. So if you're thinking about cyber threats and attack generation, this is telling you something in terms of the risk model that you can apply to this phenomena by looking at attacker economics. So, but is it worth it really? I mean, I showed you some prices and I did the first estimation that the attacker kind of assigns about $10,000 more or less, a bit less sometimes, to your system, depending on what sort of things it wants to deliver. So let's make a lower bound estimation of what this looks like, okay? So this is the advertisement for a very popular exploit kit. It's called the Eleanor exploit kit, some time ago. On the right-hand side, you see the single attacks that it embeds. On the top over there, it tells you how effective it is to exploit systems in the wild. So essentially, it tells you 1 out of 5 systems that contact the exploit kit will be infected. That's pretty much the figure that the guy tells you. It gives you the prices. This one costs us $2,000. If you want to modify the malware for antivirus evasion, it's from $50. If you want to change the domain or the IP address, it's $50. For updates, it's from $100. These are the contact times and the time zone of where the guy works in, etc. Okay, so about 11 exploits with a 20% success rate costs you approximately $2,000. Now you need traffic, right? Traffic you can get either from kind of fishy, legit services like the yellow one down here, or from the market itself. You see that on the market on top there, you see that you get the minimum zakaz is the minimum purchase. The minimum purchase you can do is for 10,000 connections. You get 3,000 for testing, so that you know that the actual connections are good. And then you can get different prices per 1,000 connection depending on where the traffic comes from. If it comes from Italy, Spain, Brazil, or Argentina, it's $3 per 1,000 connections. If it comes from Poland, Turkey, Colombia, Peru, etc., it's half that, it's 1.5. And you see that if you go on the legit market for, this is another syndicator, the yellow guy, the prices are pretty much the same, between $2 and $3 per 1,000 connection. So overall, you get to pay, let's say, $2 per 1,000 connection on average. Now let's do the math then, right? We have all this stuff, let's do the math. The math looks like this, right? You need an exploit kit. The exploit kit costs $2,000. So let's first say what's your goal. Your goal is to infect 100,000 systems. That's a fairly average malware campaign, not very successful. The numbers are typically 500,000, 1 million if you're very, very good. 100,000 is kind of an average thing. So you buy an exploit kit, that's $2,000. Then you need to infect 100,000 machines. You remember exploit kit has 20% efficiency, so you need 5 times that number of connections, which is 500,000. You need to pay for the setup, it's about $100. The traffic, assuming $2 per 1,000 connection, that are those 500,000 that you need over there, it's about $1,000. Maintenance is another 100, updates is about 200. You end up having to pay approximately $2,000 $2,500 to get to infect 100,000 machines. Is it worth it? Well, you have 100,000 machines you are controlling. You have full control over 100,000 machines. You have access to all the data stored on that machines. You have all the computational power of all that machines at your hand. You can send any command you want to these machines. So you take what you invested and you divide it by the number of machines. You need to make 2 cents out of each machines to break even. For this investment to be worth it, at least. Can you imagine at least 150 ways of making more than 2 cents out of 100,000 machines that you control? I mean, some ideas? What you will do to make more than 2 cents on a machine that you have complete control over my machine. Okay, you get this. This one, you're controlling it from remote. How do you make more than 2 cents out of it? If you don't have ideas, you're not good criminals. I mean, I know you are a criminal. Leave it.
Go to your bank account.
You get my bank account. Somebody wants my credit card. This is stored in there. You want to blackmail me. All the information you need is over there. You want to use all the information or all the computational power of this machine to break some crypto protocol or getting data out of the NSA. That machine can do the math for you together with the other 99,000. Yeah, that number. Right, so I fear I don't have much time. There is only one thing that I want to show you. And that is the way that these markets actually work. I will have to skip through a few slides. I apologize for that. But the idea is that at the end of the day, these markets feature criminals that anonymously operate with other criminals trading illegal goods. So how is it possible that an economy works in the first place? How is not just people ripping each other off all the time? It's not like I get ripped off for a piece of malware I wanted to buy, to hack the NSA, and I get ripped off. I pay $2,000, I don't get the malware. I don't go to the FBI and say I've been ripped off, arrest that guy. I don't do it. There is no enforcement of those content. How this thing works. It's actually very amazing to see how these people are organized to actually maintain their economy. And broadly speaking, it essentially works over reputation, regulation, and punishment into the market. I will leave the reputation and regulation out, but I want to show you something of the punishment. They have actual trials. So they have a rule in the market that is, it doesn't matter when you got into the market, it doesn't matter what your position in the market is. If you think you've been ripped off, you can call anybody, you can report anybody up for trial. And these trials, I'm not using the word trial inappropriately. They are judges, there are witnesses, there is evidence, there is claims and reports and formal procedures to follow in order for the actual judgment to take place. This is an example. It's an example of somebody who said that he did not receive a payment of $3,000. The guy was actually providing malware to somebody else. The guy said that he sent over the malware, but the money never arrived. It's been a very long discussion, lasts for long, this particular process. I need to skip over it a little bit. But at the end, it turns out that the administrator says, look, you've been discussing for 2 months, and out of the evidence you provided, there is nothing finally that proves without any doubt that the payment has been delivered. You, the accused person, must show that the money has been sent over to the defender. If you cannot do that, you're going to be marked as a kidala, which means reaper in Russian, and then you will stay in this case in the market, but nobody is willing to trade with you anymore. That was the punishment there. The guy hasn't been able to do that, has been marked as a reaper, and hasn't done any business since, essentially, in the market, because now he's marked as a bad person. But even more surprising, in my opinion, is that these guys actually fear this type of punishment to the level that they get to I think remarkable extremes to comply with whatever the administration of the market tells them to do. This is an example of somebody who had a claim, I think, for $2,000. He was saying that he sent over the money, but the moment at which he sent over the money, the receiver went offline and never appeared again. After 1 hour of panic, the guy went over immediately to the forum and said, hey, I have this claim. The guy, I sent over the money, the guy disappeared. He's not answering to me anymore. And where is my money and where is my malware? the administrator calls over the guy that has been accused of ripping off the other guy, and asks for clarification. When the guy comes up immediately with very clear evidence, he says, look, at the moment, a few minutes before the money has been set over, my area in Moscow had a blackout. My internet connection went down. I could not reply anymore, and provided hard evidence of that. And then the other say, okay, but I still want my money. I'm still not very sure I want to do business with you. So the administrator goes very democratic and says, okay, you know what? Let's cancel everything. Now the money is in the control of the person who has been accused of stealing those $2,000. And what the administrator says is, send the money back. Send the $2,000 back to the defender. And then if he will want to continue the trade, you will initialize a whole new thing. Well, you guess what? What happens is that the actual guy gave back the $2,000 and posted proof of the Bitcoin transactions for the $2,000 that after a few hours go back into the wallet of the accuser. So you see how much they fear punishment. Okay, here the guy was not going to prison if he wasn't doing this. Okay, he was not being reported to the actual police. He just did not want to be punished by the community. And he complied, giving back $2,000. This is not a huge amount of money, but it's still quite impressive that an anonymous criminal would just give back money and, to simply continue operating into the market. And this is, in my opinion, at the very core why these markets work. These are the core takeaways of this for the risk-more perspective. I will leave them up there for discussion if you want. I think that I'm already 5 minutes late. So if the moderator agrees.
You got a few minutes.
I got a few minutes? You said 10 to...
10 past.
10
Questions?
past.
Yeah. So
I thought 10
I do
before.
want to give the demo, because the demo is nice.
Oh yeah, if you want to see the demo, I can show you the
So you
demo.
can see, if you want to see the actual thing.
Do you want to see the actual things working? You want to see how they look like? Everybody says yeah. Okay, so screw the core takeaways, right? Okay. That will require a moment of setup. Give me a minute. I need to hook up my computer, and then with the disclaimer that of course demos never work when they're done live. So you will excuse me if I will have to do this 5 times. I hope not, but who knows? Just a moment. I need the HDMI cable of this guy. Good enough. Disappear from there, right? My computer is not very happy. You see my display? Yeah. Okay, so I was quicker than I expected. So here is a list of, these are all my virtual machine that I used to test this type of, can we maybe turn down a little bit that thing? Oh, I have no idea.
Oh yeah, come on, it's blinds on
Selected
here.
blinds
I was going to say, I'm not lectured in it.
Lights.
I'll be over here.
This is lights. So no.
That's lights.
I don't know. I didn't know about that because it's right there, and you will not see much because.
It's definitely electric. I don't
It
want
looks
to
like.
Here is raise.
There we are.
There you go.
Oh, yo. No, that doesn't
That
seem
one's
to.
broken.
You think I'm gonna break it? Well, let's put it all the way back
Yeah,
up.
all the way up and then try. There's a lot of rubbish one.
I'd let it down. Let's put it down. Put it down. Put it down.
Ah, but the left-hand side looks like it's gonna, unless somebody hangs up on the right-hand side and takes it down.
Yes. They must
I don't think it's worth to risk damaging that thing further.
We've got a resilience manager sat underneath it there. We shouldn't ask him to do it.
Right. No, okay, well, just squeeze your
See it
eyes.
quite well.
It does?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
My eyes are-
So, well, these are all my machines. I should have. So what I do is that I have a Windows XP machine over here that I've got to use as the victim, and then there is the Debian machine over there that is a Linux distribution that has all the stuff that I want it to have. I fear you will not be able to see too much of this, but let me try at least. So this is my machine where I have my exploit kits and that sort of things. Let me go there first. I can show you. Yeah, here it asks for my thing.
Is that your username?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes. No, it's actually the name of the tool. I mean, it's called Crime Pack. You see, it's very evocative with money and cocaine and pistols. It's very drug kind of Russian mafia-oriented kind of thing. So now I'm just logging into the interface. Oh yeah, it worked. Okay. So this is the. Let me see if I can get it a bit bigger. Can I zoom into this thing?
No, I wouldn't do that.
You wouldn't zoom in?
I don't think the scroll will work on. I've never managed to. Oh.
No, it's okay. You just have the wrong
Oh, yeah.
computer. Right, so this is the main interface. Now, I didn't attack anybody, right? So you see that there are all the zeros, but then you see on the top there is the menu. There is the main page. There is this one. You can refresh the statistics. It has the countries that you've been attacking, downloader, the iframe that I'm going to show you, clear stats and settings. And down there you have all the description of what your victims look like, okay? So it tells you how many unique hits you have, how many unique systems you have been able to affect, the number of times the malware has been executed, and the rate of success of the exploit kit. You remember the other criminal was claiming 20%, okay? So this is exactly the type of number. Then you get the actual breakdown by which exploits, which attacks really worked. You see the list on the second table there. This is an Internet Explorer one. This is for Microsoft Windows. This is for a PDF application. Java, this is again Windows, and so on. Okay, Java, ActiveX. There should be some Flash things. I think it's this one. Okay, so you have a number of exploits, and then here it gives you statistics by the type of operating system that has been affected. If that's a Windows 2000 machine, Windows Vista, Windows XP, this is a bit old. This was from 2013. And there you also get the stats by browser. So if it was an Internet Explorer, Firefox, or whatnot. Now this is empty, of course, so there's not much interesting to see. Here is the actual the iframe, the advertisement. I can actually show you how this will work. You see on the top is this is you never saw HTML, did you? It's the language in which the web pages are written, and that thing over there is just one sentence of that language. That essentially, when it's executed by your browser, it says. Load that address over there, that is this HTTP localhost crimepack313 index.php. Okay? That is the page, the web page that has the actual attacks embedded that this website, this crimepack implements. And then the gibberish that you see underneath is an equivalent of that, but it's obfuscated, it's encrypted. So that if you look at that and you're like technically savvy as a person, you see that there is somebody who is loading something that looks fishy, okay? If you look at the other one, you have no clue what's happening, okay? But that thing underneath does exactly the same functionality as the thing above. Okay, so you can readily decide, say I attack bbc.com, I can add this code to the web page and it will automatically redirect the user through the ad syndication thing that I showed you before to my pack and deliver the attacks. Then maybe could be interesting to see the setting page where there is a bit of the administrative things with the password and username. Then the loader file is the actual piece of malware. What I did is that I armed this exploit kit with the Windows calculator. You know the calculator, you write calc and the calculator in Windows pops up. I gave it that as a piece of malware. I can give it anything, okay? I can give it ransomware, I can give it keyloggers, I can give it whatever I want, okay? I just gave it the calculator because this way, when I will attack the Windows machine with this system, you will see the calculator popping up, which means that the attack has been successful, and the calculator could have been any piece of malware, really, okay? It's just to give you visual feedback, because of course, typically malware doesn't say, hey, I'm malware, I'm being executed, right? Then there is the list of actual nice functionalities. It tells you that if you can configure the kit such that if it receives a connection from a system it cannot attack because it does not have the right exploit, it will just redirect the user to google.com, okay? So it will not deliver the attack. Can you imagine why they would like to do that? Why that's a nice feature of an exploit kit? Anything pops in mind? Why do they not want to try attacks that they know will not succeed? Because
you don't leave any evidence.
Exactly, yes, because this way the attack remains more stealthy. You don't want to send out code, you don't want to send out malicious activity that you know has no chance of actually working, okay? You don't want to do that because then security researchers will pop it up and arm the Norton antivirus to detect that type of attack. But they want to keep it very minimal, very stealthy. Then it gives you the list of the exploits that you can actually use. These are the various bits and pieces that you can have. You have also an aggressive mode that essentially tells you ignore everything that is on top of it, just launch the whole thing against the machine and tough luck for the guy, okay? So this is the way you can configure it. So now let's see if this thing actually works. Let me pop up my good old Windows XP machine that is always useful for this stuff. So this is a normal Windows on the left-hand side. It's a normal Windows operating system. Okay, so what I do is that I go on Internet Explorer. I can just show you that. So the IP address of that machine is 192.168. Yeah, 168.0.1 / I don't remember. Right. Okay, so this is like the web server over there is answering, and then I go into the HTML web page. Okay, this is a normal web page, okay, just to show you that this could be the bbc.com thing. Right, that's a perfectly normal web page, just to show you that it works as promised. Now, let me move. This web page is stored onto this machine, right? So you need to give me a second. I can actually go over and just a sec. I need to do this manually because I can't produce it before. HTML. So what I do is that I will edit. Let's say that I am essentially engineering an attack against that web page. Okay, I'm taking bbc.com and I'm putting on my iframe on it. That's what I'm doing now. Kind of thing. All right, so this is the code of the actual web page. What I do is that I go over to my exploit kit, I get to iframe, I select this code, copy, I paste it somewhere else that is in the file over here. And so this is the whole code that displays this picture, this web page. Okay, it's all coded into this page. I scroll down, I go to the very bottom, right before the code ends, and I plug in my code that I just got from my exploit kit. The only thing I need to do is to change this, because that's the wrong address. This is the address of my machine, 192.168.0.1, just the IP address of my machine, and then I do that. So what happens now is that if I save this, what should happen never know, is that the browser over there still loads bbc.com, that is my web page over here, but now bbc.com also has this redirect over there. And if you see, the interesting thing as well is that this thing is invisible. You can configure this frame into the web page to be only 1 pixel large. So even if the thing was not working, you would never notice it. Okay, you don't see strange content. For the browser, it makes no difference. Still executes what's written in there. It's just that visually there is no feedback for the user, so you don't know that something else is happening on the browser page. So let me click the button. I save this thing. Did I save it? I hope I did. Right. So wanna give it a shot? Let's see what happens if I just update. Oh, there it is. And that's the calculator. It's an actual calculator. It's 5 times 5 equals
125.
Bravo, Julian. And that's what I mean. It's an actual calculator. Okay. So this is what happens. You see, it's very seamless. It just happened, and then if I do refresh over here, you see it updated my statistic. It tells me that my exploit rate has been 100%. It used the MDAC exploit, which is an Internet Explorer kind of attack. It tells me that it loaded successfully once on Internet Explorer. We have 1 Windows XP attack over there, and now I have my malware executing on the other machine. You see, I didn't do too much, right? I just had the exploit kit. I just attacked bbc.com. I put in my stuff, and then the kit did everything for myself. And you see that the user, the Windows XP guy, hadn't to do anything. I just updated the very page I was loading before. I just loaded bbc.com, and then suddenly my computer executed the calculator or piece of malware. Okay, so this is how it works, I suppose. Okay, right. This was the end of the day. I'm right on time. Thanks. If you want to discuss something, you have questions or anything else.
So you got a little bit of time for questions, or is it
Just 5 minutes for questions?
5 minutes? Yeah. If there's any particular questions around.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I just ask simple questions, as you say, all these hacking, predominantly Russian and Chinese speaking, is there any reason why Russia is it? I just wonder why Russia is the forefront of hacking.
It's a very interesting question. It has a lot to do with international politics and development of Russia as a place. Okay. So what happened after the Soviet Union collapsed is that the new governments put a lot of effort into encouraging engineering kind of education, also in software engineering, which resulted in having a number. I mean, the Moscow University, St. Petersburg University are pretty good universities with software engineering. I mean, they are very good, and they deliver very good education to their students, which means that the people that go over there and study these things are very good at what they do. But the market in Russia, the job market in Russia, is not capable of absorbing those capabilities. And Russian being Russians, I mean, there are also some fun stories, some insider jokes in Russia, but I will leave them out because they're not very well translatable. But what they do is that they don't really like to leave the country too much in general. Okay, so what they say is that they just stay in Russia, it's all right, but they are not able to actually find a job that satisfies them, that produces the amount of money that they're actually technically capable of delivering. This on top of the fact that the internal, my system shut down. This on top of the fact that the internal politics of Russia are very self-contained, may I say, means that those mechanisms that I showed you before, whereby attacks are not delivered within Russia, they are not executed on systems that have a Cyrillic keyboard layout, they're not executed on systems that comes from the ex-Soviet countries and stuff like this, means that pretty much all the impact of this economy is outside of Russia, which means that every time, and I had actually a story I was telling just before coming here, is that, and this is now public knowledge, okay, so back in the day around 2012, there was a very big botnet of more than 2 million systems, very successful botnet, was spreading through Facebook. called the Kupfest. Kupfest was run by Russian actors who were based in St. Petersburg. They actually were students at the St. Petersburg University. And I know for a fact, because it was kind of involved in how these things developed, is that the Interpol knew very well who those two people were. They had the names, and they had the names for as long as 2 years before anything happened. Because what happened between getting the names and getting them to be arrested is that the Interpol was continuously going over to the Russian authorities saying, hey, those people are infecting systems everywhere. They're causing a huge economic impact. They're stealing credit cards of the 2 million people. Arrest them, please. And the Russians answered, you know what? Nothing happened in Russia. For as far as we are concerned, it's your problem. To the point that the Interpol had to wait for these guys to actually land in Charles de Gaulle before they could put handcuffs on them, right? So if you take this sort of international politics kind of thing, very protective Russian politics, on top of the fact that the market is not really capable of absorbing the talent that their education system produce, you get people with a lot of free time and a lot of fun to have.
So provided they don't hack Russian or Russian speaking,
Yeah,
they'll be alright.
yeah, yeah. In fact, my system is configured in Russian. I never got out. It's a very good antivirus. It is. You set your keyboard to be Cyrillic. There is actually malware that detects the keyboard layout. If it detects a Cyrillic setup, it quits executing. It does not pop up the calculator if you want. It just quits. It kills itself. So it's a very, very effective antivirus mechanism. Much better than paying $2,000 for Semantic Norton, right?
Indeed, what happened to the chat paunch, wasn't it, is a big indicator of why you don't mess with these.
Yeah. That's. You remember when I told you the story that I first get into the market, like normally getting into the market, and then I had to re-infiltrate it because after the arrest of a prominent guy, the market shut down. The guy was Ponch, and back it was named Ponch in the market. Well, doesn't matter. And what he did is that he messed with the wrong people. He was attacking Russian systems, and the Russian authorities actually. And that was a big lesson learned for the market. Since then, pretty much all it's actually a big advertisement point to say my technology only outside of Russia. That's like a big plus in terms of sales, right? It's a feature, right? Yeah.
You said that they are having these internal trials.
Yeah.
The whole thing is anonymous, is it?
Yeah.
So why doesn't the person only just create a new account, a new identity, and just go on with it?
Because it's very difficult.
It is.
It is very difficult. First of all, identities are anonymous, but everybody tends to use the same nickname throughout communities. So as I told you, before I was able to get back into the market, I had to build my own identity. And then I always use the same nickname throughout so that my history would be traceable to the market administrators. Now, if the market administrators know that the guy who has been banned from that market has a certain name, then the guy needs to redo everything back again. And the cost of going through this process is a lot. Because then, once you're in, it took me about 7-8 months to do that, but then I stayed in the market and I'm just observing stuff. I am not a proficient trader into that market. If I wanted to get back to the status where people trusted me enough to proceed with the trades with myself so that I actually make money, it takes several years to actually get there. You see that the big, more prominent vendors in the markets are either vouched by the administrators that somehow verify the technology and whatnot, or are people that have been in the market and have been trading for several years. So that's why they don't want to be kicked out. As a matter of fact, now you cannot get back into the market at all. Now the market is closed. The market is still operating, but it's completely, what's the word?
Sealed.
Yeah, sealed. So if you're in already, so lucky for me, I can stay in, I can do stuff. If you are from outside or you're kicked out, tough luck. You will never get back in.
It's also worth saying that there are some physical punishments if you really, really annoy you.
Well, they disappear from the market now. That's why I wasn't saying it. But then it's also one of the reasons why I don't want my relation with the market to be disclosed at all, is because there is evidence in the past that when these people feel like they've been ripped off very badly, they get very angry at people, they actually track them down in real life. I've seen people posting, the home address of the girlfriend of a guy, or the plate number, or delivering very suggestive kind of content to his home address and things like this. So you don't want these things to happen. You really fear that sort of punishment. Well, I certainly do. Right? So it's not good. Yeah.
Okay, well, last question.
Oh, I was just going to say, do you know actually how much, what the worth is of this actual market, like the actual trading, like how much money?
They're not huge. To be honest, they're not huge. It's huge the externality that they create to the world as a whole. But it's in this market there are about 24 active players. The technology that they produce is, you can think about 50 to 80 new products per every 2 months, more or less, or re-engineering of all products. And there are approximately overall 1,500 people active, okay, in the trading sections. It's not very huge. Remember, it's confined to Russia, and it requires very specific type of interest. So the numbers don't surprise me too much that they're not in the hundreds of thousands. But then the market is fairly limited. Then, as I told you, if you sell an exploit kit for $2,000 to about 10 people, it's still good money after all. When you do some stuff, those that are very successful are able to make a good living out of it. Okay? People that have been arrested have been arrested with a substantial amount of wealth on their side. Okay. But then, to be honest, I have the impression that it's few the number of people, let's say, that are very successful economically in the market. Most of them, they make a decent living, but they don't become rich, if that was your question.
Okay, so I think that's the point at which we have to leave it. So we're a little bit over, and if we just like to sort of thank Luca again in the standard way.